Good morning. We'd like to welcome to our Sunday morning Bible class. We're going to be in Judges 17 this morning. So if you want to go ahead and grab your Bible and turn over to Judges 17, that is where we will be today. We only have a couple more weeks in the book of Judges. We will make every attempt to finish Judges and also go on to the book of Ruth over the course of the month of October. And so if you want to go ahead and read ahead, you can be reading the rest of Judges on into Ruth as well. We will be covering that in the next few weeks. Please keep Brother Gary in your prayers as he is traveling for a gospel meeting this week. And so just keep him in your prayers that the meeting will go well, that he will have safe travels as well. As well as when you came in this morning, hopefully you grabbed one of our bulletins, and hopefully you have seen the long prayer list. We ask you to please keep all of these in our prayers. We have a lot of people going through their different things, whether it's sickness or operations or death of loved ones. And so we ask you to keep all of those people in your prayers continually. We also had, and we'll mention a little bit more of this in the worship hour, but we also had a door knocking yesterday, and we had 11 people, we've had 11 people over the course of a couple of door knockings, that have said they want some more information on the church. And so we're going to be going back to these people, trying to, build some relationships with them, trying to show them about the church, and hopefully setting up some Bible studies with these. So we were really excited about that. And so we ask you, pray for not only those particular opportunities, but just every opportunity we have. We always try, usually at the end of class, to give our plug for evangelism. Our theme this year is Just One More. And so we are trying to push that through the entire year, and really it's probably a theme that's just going to keep forevermore going. We want to always be about soul winning and about helping those come to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And so keep all of that in your prayers, all those that are sick, all those that are hurting, all those that are in potential Bible studies, that all will go well. Judges chapter 17 starts a period of time that is unlike the rest of the book, in that normally you're going to see a hero. You're going to see this person rise up, and they're going to be the person that's going to come in, and they're just going to rescue things, all because the power of God is with them. Even Samson, that we talked about the past couple of weeks, while Samson had some character flaws, granted we all do, but he definitely had some character flaws that he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. In his final moments, he turns to God and he asks God, just one more time, God. One more time, give me the strength. And it is said that basically in Samson's final act, that he killed more Philistines in his final act than he had in his entirety of being a judge. And so that is an impressive act. Granted, he had a lot of character problems. But we've read about many other judges that, they came and they helped and they served and they helped bring the people. And while they were judging, things were going good while they were judging. But the book of Judges is all about that cycle pattern of here are the people, and they continually fall away. They fall away into apostasy. They fall away into no longer doing as the Lord had commanded them to do. They're not living the right way, and it usually takes some sort of punishment, some sort of nation coming up against them, sort of a problem for them to finally cry back out again to the Lord and say, Lord, we need your help. Now, I think we can learn a lot from that. Do we fall into the same cycle? And of course, we're going to say, obviously, yes, of course, we all sin. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God, and that's those that are Christians and non-Christians. We all sin. We fall short. But do we make a habit of falling into that cycle over and over and over again? And I don't mean like years apart, months apart, weeks apart. I'm talking about day in and day out. We're just constantly, Lord, forgive me, and then we're right back doing the same thing again. If that's our cycle, if that's our pattern, then we have work to do, right? That's not saying that we're any different from anybody else. We have work to do as an individual Christian. If that's the pattern of our life, we need to change our pattern. And we need to work on that pattern and put in an effort to not have that kind of pattern in our life. The children of Israel went years where their pattern was just sin, and their pattern was apostasy, and their pattern was just doing things that made them feel good. And so we look into the Old Testament. I love looking at the Old Testament because it teaches us so many great lessons. If you don't like reading the Old Testament, read books like the book of Judges, because it speaks volumes to the way we are as people. We fall from God, and we need his help. And they needed his help numerous times over again. But like we said, Judges 17 and following, we're getting into a period of this book of the Judges that is going to be a little bit different. You're not going to necessarily see this heroic figure just swoop in and take charge and lead the people out. And no, you're going to see a continuation of sin and of problems. That's what we're going to start to see here in Judges chapter 17. Judges 17, starting in we're actually going to read first verse 6, and then I will tell you why in a second. So in verse 6, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes." See, following this period of judges and then the ruling of a couple of priestly families, you're going to eventually get to a time period where Israel does have a king. And that's going to be true. They're actually going to request that. And that's going to be something that they do against God. They request an earthly king instead of having God as their king. But they're not there yet. They don't have a king that's ruling in Israel. They've had judges. They've had good people. But what happens is they continually fall back into this cycle. And it says that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Now, how would that work? How would that work for us? We're not talking about the rest of the world. We're talking about us. What would happen if we individually did what was right in our eyes? Would it be good? Would good things come from that if every single one of us did what was right in our own eyes? No. It would not necessarily be good. What you got? We would be sinning against God and needing to seek repentance, absolutely. And this is coming from a group of people that, we're Christians. We're following after God. We're doing what's right, we'll just say at least most of the time. But we still have desires and temptations. If we did what was right in our own eyes or did what we wanted to do, it might not happen immediately. It might not be an immediate fall away. At first, we might say, well, we want God, we want his statutes, we want his commandments, and we're going to keep following those. But at least eventually, one by one, many of us, I won't say all of us because I'm not speaking for you, I'll speak for me. Many of us, though, will start to drift and fall away. So here, this time period for these people is going to be a very tragic time period in their life. Now, you want to talk about our world? We've talked about us for a minute. Let's go out into the world for a second. Generally speaking, does the world do what's right in their own eyes? A lot of the world does. I'm still not going to classify everybody like that. But in general, people do what's right in their own eyes. What they think to be right. Now, that might, for some people, they seem to be good people. They give in charity. They're loving. They're kind. They seem to be hospitable. They have all these good characteristics, but they're still not following God the way He told us to. And we need to kind of see that, even amongst our friends who do a lot of good things. If they're not following after God, then they need God. They need Him. They need His Son. Here, we have to watch out for, just like they had to watch out for in the days of the judges, we have to watch out for going with the status quo, falling into this idea where you do what's right for you, I'll do what's right for me. We have to be careful of that because that's what's being taught in our world a lot of times. We can't always do what's right in our own eyes because sometimes we're sinners. We fall short. And we need God's direction to come back home. Yep. That's right. That's right. She said, if you do not know the word, you might be doing what's right in your own eyes, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. That's not necessarily making you righteous there before God. I think about the Apostle Paul. When he was known as Saul, he was doing what was right in his eyes. He was wrong, though. We have a lot of people in our world, they're doing what's right in their eyes. They might even do good things, but they're still living in a wrong kind of way. And we need people to see that, and we need to see that. Judges chapter 17, though, is a time period where the people, they lost sight of their true leader, and that's God. Now, I think this is a pattern that's going to be established here, and it's going to continue on. That the people are going to forget who their God is and who they're supposed to be following. They're going to stray into sin. They're going to stray into idol worship. They're going to stray into the worship of their land. See, the book of Judges shows us that the children of Israel, they had problems. And a lot of their problems stem from the fact that they didn't do as the Lord commanded them to do and drive these nations from this land. That as they let people live there, they were then persuaded by their lifestyles, by their religion, by their false gods. And it would eventually creep its way into affecting people that were supposed to be following after God. And we're going to see that here in Judges 17. As we come into this chapter, we're going to see these events in the life of a man named Micah, who lived in Mount Ephraim and a representative. He's, as a whole, a representative of this time period. Now, these notes this morning, most of these do come from Brother Gary. He had written most of this already, and no reason to reinvent the wheel. And also keeps in pattern kind of as he goes through into next week. But I want us to see just what happened in the life of Micah, what he did, how he influenced other people, and how that eventually led for even entire tribes to be impacted by his decisions. So let's turn Judges chapter 17, starting in verse 1. Now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here is the silver with me, I took it. Now let's pause here. This is a very typical mother-son conversation, because children mess up from time to time, right? They do. Now, I've never taken 1,100 shekels of silver from my mother. And in fact, if I did, I'm sure she would be highly upset. We would be having a long conversation. And in fact, when I was a child, I'd have received a lot of discipline too. As an adult, she had probably called the cops, honestly. But as a child, she would have reprimanded me in some way, shape, or form. So you see this relationship here, that here he is, and I have some curious thoughts in this. It says that she placed a curse on this. It says that this was even done in his ear. And so my mind gets to spinning a little bit. I wonder, is this a mother who knows what her son has done, who continually brings this up in his presence, who brings up what she has done and how she has cursed this and how she has done, and to get him to form a guilty conscience to where he comes back to her and tells her what is going on? That's just something I've wondered and I've thought about all week as I've read through this. You moms can speak to that, but I know my mom did that to me. Have you ever done that to your children? Maybe. Maybe even some of us dads have done something similar to that. So I just kind of wonder if some of that has transpired here as we go to this. But you see 1,100 shekels of silver were taken from her. But let's pay a special attention to what these 1,100 shekels of silver were for as we come down into the rest of these verses. They're finishing verse 2, and his mother said, may you be blessed by the Lord my son. So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a molten image. Now therefore I will return it to you. Thus he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver, gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. So we see a little bit more about this silver. It says there's 1,100 shekels of silver. He's going to return it to her upon hearing upon the curse. She asked the Lord's blessing on him, dedicated the silver to the Lord, and gave it back to her son. From that, these images, these graven images, are going to be made for worship. Now, when you think about here is a mother and son that are claiming to want to worship God. At first, the son has wronged the mother by taking of the silver, by taking of these items. He has then come back, and maybe just out of guilt, we don't exactly know, but he has turned these back in, and now this money is going to be used, instead of glorifying God and praising him, this silver is going to be used to make graven images, make idols, make things that God from the very beginning, especially as he gave law to Moses and the children of Israel, had forbidden. Had they not learned? Had they not learned the lessons that God had put before them, that there will be no other gods before me? Not to make any graven images. You're not to do these kind of things to worship God, because God had already given them a way to worship. He had already told them what they needed to do in order to be pleasing before him. We've talked about in our Wednesday night class a lot about the tabernacle and a lot about things that were going to transpire. They had already been given the law by this point. They have already been given those instructions. They had already been established the priesthood. They had already established all these things, and idol worship was not part of it. They weren't to make graven images. They weren't to do these kind of things. These were substitutes that they brought in because they saw what they wanted to see. They did what they wanted to do. They did what was right in their own eyes. And so they decided, hey, yes, it's fine. We'll take silver that is supposed to be dedicated to God. It's supposed to be his. We'll take it for ourselves. We'll make these images, and God's going to be happy. It doesn't track with God at all through this entirety of Old Testament scripture. It doesn't track with God today. Now, we have a lot of friends and neighbors around us that probably teach something that would maybe fall into this. I'll pick one out of it. We'll throw out instrumental music. Okay? We're doing what's right in our own eyes versus what Scripture says. Okay? Pick on other religions around the world. Are there still religions in our world that worship idols? Yes, there are. Are they as numerous as they might have used to have been? No. But let's come back to the United States for a minute. Do we worship idols? Yes, we do. We might not build, statues of them and place them in our home, but maybe we do. Maybe the idols we worship are above our fireplace in the section of our televisions. Maybe the idols we worship are in our pockets in the place of our mobile phone. Maybe the idol we worship is our bank accounts and the collection of monetary gain. Our idols don't necessarily have to be things that are taken from stone and carved with a chisel. They can be anything we put in the place of God can be our idols. So let us not think for a second that our world, and I'm talking about our immediate surroundings, are not impacted by idolatry, because they are. We are impacted by idolatry, and this was the same kind of thing that was happening here in the days of Micah. They were being corrupted by idolatry. So we continue on in our reading. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and household idols. and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. I think it's a great statement to say there at the end of all of this that has transpired, because Micah truly had done everything that was right in his own eyes. His mother had been ignorant of the commands of God. These idols were set up. But now we're going to move on to how this was going to spread. This was not just something that was going to impact Micah and his immediate family. This wasn't just going to impact his son. This wasn't just going to impact his mother. He was going to bring additional people into this conversation that were going to be impacted by this. Looking there into verse 7. Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" So he said to him, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance." So the Levites went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and he lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as priest." Now there is so much wrong with this statement, with this passage of Scripture. Not necessarily wrong with what it says, but just wrong with what it implies and what it's reporting of what this man has now done. He has now taken a person that was essentially, he was innocent. He wasn't part of this. Micah and his mother and his son and his family, they had started idol worship on their own. It was their individual problem. Now, yes, when there was sin in the camp of Israel, it impacted the whole nation. And this is one of the ways it impacted the whole nation. It wasn't just about a man covering up or trying to lie or cheat, as it happened in other times with the children of Israel. In this case, he was going to spread his idolatry to other people. He was going to take other people down with him. He was going to try to justify his actions and his means by trying to put a bandage on it by saying, "Look, I have a Levite as my priest. I'm covered," because Levites were the only ones allowed to be priests anyway. So he was trying to cover himself. He's like, "Look, Lord, I have a Levite." Let's see how well this works for him. So we see there in verse 7 through 13, Levite been living in Bethlehem, was searching for a new place to live, and he came to the house of Micah. The Levites did not have necessarily their own dwelling of land. They had certain cities in which they were allowed to occupy and use. They had places that they would work in and things of that sort. But they did not have like a piece of land like Judah had or like other nations had. I mean, they were just different. They had a specific purpose, and their purpose was to be the Lord's priest, to serve in that capacity and to serve in that religious way. And so Micah is going to see this young man. This young man needs a place to live. The young man told him, "I'm searching for a place to stay." So he had a bargaining chip here. He had something he could discuss with him. "Hey, I got an idea. What if I give you, as it says, 10 shekels of silver a year, along with a suit of clothes and food to serve in his house of God?" I don't know their time period and exactly what this currency amounts to, but this young man says, "That sounds like a great deal. I got some money, I got clothes, got food, I get to serve the Lord. This is just great." Either he was young and foolish, or he just didn't care. I don't really know his heart in this, but I know what he's going to become a part of. He's going to become a part of idol worship. He's going to become a part of something that God never had authorized. In fact, not only didn't authorize, he forbid it. No graven images. No other gods before me. So we see here that here's this young man that is hired to be his priest, his individual family priest. And this made Micah extremely happy. I think that's the way a lot of us feel, right? When we start to justify ourselves, we, for that split second, for that brief moment, we feel happiness inside. We've taught ourselves, we convinced ourselves that what we are doing is going to be okay because, the Lord knows my heart, as I've heard said 1,000 times over again. And the Lord does know our heart. It does not justify evil, though. It does not justify disobedience. The Lord knows our heart day in and day out. That doesn't mean that Derek gets to go around doing whatever he wants to do, and there won't be consequences there before the Lord. Even if what we are taking each and every day is not something that we're going to get ourselves in trouble with the authorities of our land, our God will always know. And here in this place, it sounds like, Micah, he had his own house, he had his own place, he had enough to where this Levite could come in, can make his living here. It sounds a little, separated from society a little bit. But at the same time, did that make what he was doing right? Just because he was maybe doing his own thing, his own, we'll call it a compound just for our visualization. So he has his own compound, he has his own structure, has his own place they can worship and do their own things, has his own household idols, he has his own priest now. Did that make it right? Did that justify him? Well, no. But in Micah's heart, it did. He's like, you know what? He says it. Right here, it says, then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me since I have a Levite as a priest. He knows it. That's what he's convinced himself of, that he knows this. We have a lot of people in our world that especially, and I'll talk about Christians, you ask them if they're saved, and the answer they give is, well, I think so. Maybe. I try and I get all of that because I've said the same things before too. But this is a reality that we need to come to terms with. We can know that we are saved. There's a surety in that. There's a hope that is unlike any hope this world offers. This world offers hope and it might not happen. God offers hope and it is a sure thing. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. I agree. And just to repeat for those that are online and for those that might not could hear, what was being said is that as Christians, we have to do an evaluation of what happened in our, if we find ourselves living, not necessarily in this situation in idolatry, but just in sin in general, we have to evaluate what got us there. Was it a drift that happened slowly over time that we just got slowly led there? Were we never grounded in the Word to start with? And therefore, it was just real easy to be just swooped away into all the lawlessness that takes place in sin. We have to identify with that. We have to come to terms with that. And that was something that Micah needed, his mother needed, his children needed, and this Levite needed. They all needed to do an evaluation of their life. And that is something that we allow sin to put the blinders on us. We allow sin to cover it up. We even go to the level of here and trying to justify ourselves. The only way we're justified is in Christ Jesus. That's it. That's the only way we're not going to justify ourselves, and we need to pay special attention to that. Now, we need to move on into chapter 18 because, like we said before, this does not impact just Micah, his family, now this Levite. Now it's going to impact an entire tribe of people, and we're going to see how this goes. So starting in chapter 18, there in verse 1 and 2, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in, for until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Estiol, to spy out the land and search it. They said to them, 'Go search the land.' So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there." So to make some just observations here about these people, the Danites, the people of Dan, they numbered about 64,400 males of the ages of 20 years old and up at the last census time. We can see this in Numbers 26, 42, and 43, Judges 1, 34. So we see here that this is these people of Dan, and they talked about not having a land to possess. Now, let's be clear. That doesn't mean that they were never given an allotment. It meant that there were people living in their land, and they decided that they couldn't take it, and they went up to the mountains, and they were going to just kind of let them be pushed out of the way. Their lack of land had a lot to do with their lack of leadership and their lack of following through, and not because God did not give these people anything and was not with them. And so they already had some problems in their land and in their numbers. And so the land allotted to them would have been sufficient had the Amorites not forced them to the mountains. And that's something that we need to understand about these people. And we can make some observations to us as well. When we allow the world to push us around and to allow us to just kind of fit in with the world, then yes, the world tempted us, sin tempted us. There was outside distractions and outside forces at play. Yes, all that's true. We're still the one that made the choices. We're still the one that let it happen. So we're just as guilty. Okay, it's still our sin problem. It's not the world's sin problem. It's ours. We're the ones that did that, and Dan needed to take some ownership for their own problems. The men of Dan decided they did not have enough land to pass from father to son for an inheritance. They're going to send out 5 men to spy out the land that they could occupy. And so we see them there at the conclusion of verse 2. They have come to the house of Micah. So picking up in verse 3, while they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He was hired, and I have become his priest. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we will go will be prosperous." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way." So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. So here we see these people, and that these 5 spies, they've come to Micah. They've recognized this priest. They've asked basically for this priest to inquire of the Lord if their journey is going to be prosperous. And here's a priest that is working in a house as that is condoning idol worship, condoning all of these, and now this is the man supposed to be giving them spiritual advice and advice that's going to help them along their journey. And of course, everything was going to be positive and good. Isn't that the way that it goes? When we fall into sin, into idolatry and everything, that justification is kept on kind of corrupting everything from that point. And so we're going to see that here's this priest and how he gives this advice. And these Danites, they go and they look and they see Laish, and they see this people. They see what it's like, lack of leaders, being able to maybe make their place here. And so this is going to be intriguing to them, and they're going to take this report back, starting here in verse 8, back to their leaders. And so we come in verse 8, and the spies came back to the brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?" So they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter and possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And so this is the report that comes back to these people. This is a report they come back to give to their leadership, that they can come in, they can take this land, and it's even said that the Lord has given this land to them. So moving on to verse 11, and 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah to Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped at Kirjath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they should call the place Mahane, encamped at Mahane Dan to this day. There it is, west of Kirjath Jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. So this group of men, this warlike group, is going to be coming through. They're going to pitch their tents and they're going to camp, and then they're going to move on, as we see, and they're going to move towards the house of Micah. All this time with this concept, Lord's on our side and we're doing what's right. We've gotten the word from the Lord, and everything is going to be all fine. Verse 14, then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image? Now therefore consider what you should do." So they turned aside there, came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men, armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up, entering there. They took the carved image and the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. So let's just kind of recap a little bit. The 5 men come, they see what Micah has going on. They see what's happening here. We don't really know the Danites, full story here, but they see what's going on with them. And now when the 600 warlike men come, and they come to the household of Micah, it's not just a friendly visit. It's not just a, let's go in and let's have supper with them and let's, see what they have to say. No. This is now, it's a conquering venture. It is a time in which they come in, they basically take what they want. And they're going to leave very quickly. And they're going to take these idols with them. What did Dan need with these idols? Was this something that they really needed? Was it something that was going to help them in their worship to God? Was it something that was going to be beneficial for them? And so it talks about this young priest, this young Levite. And they said to him there in verse 19, "Be quiet and put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. It is better for you to be a priest or is it better for you to be a priest of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. They turned and departed, and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you, that you have gathered such a company?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and you have gone away Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you? And the children of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household. Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Now, this encounter here, as we see, is just kind of what happens in our world when things start to drift. When we start finding ourselves in too bad places, and doing bad kind of things, we end up running across people that are not necessarily going to deal very kindly with us. Now, that can happen to us even when we're doing good things, but you do see a pattern of that in our world when you start getting into the sinful deeds of the world, that you find yourself among sinful people, and you find yourself among sinful activities that are going on, and it just seems to snowball from there. Now, like I said, that can happen to good Christian people that are doing good and godly things. Bad things can still happen to them. This could have been a family here that was worshiping God the way they were worshiping, and somebody could have come in and could have killed the family and could have done all these terrible things to them. That could have been the situation, but it wasn't. In this situation, you had a family that's not doing what's right. People see that. They come, they take what they want. They even take their priest from them. The priest is then motivated. It almost sounds like out of pride to, well, should I be a priest of one man or a priest of an entire tribe? He's motivated by that to keep his mouth shut and to participate in the taking of these gods. But then notice this is how far gone Micah's thought process is. It's not, oh wait, these gods are gone and I can now worship God the way I'm supposed to. He's going to run them down, wanting to fight, it seems like, and wanting to put up a defense for his gods. And the people of Dan are like, what ails you? I'd put it in my terms, what's your problem? And he's like, well, my problem is you took my idols, you took my gods, as he says it. Were they really his God? Is that how far he had gone? That this was his God now? That these pieces of rock were what he has put in the place of God? He's supposed to be a righteous man, a God-fearing man. The Levite is supposed to be, the Danites, all of them are supposed to be people that are following after God, and yet now these pieces of stone or these pieces of silver that have been formed, that have been shapen, they have now taken the place of God to the point of war. Are we going to put up that kind of fight to live a sinful life? Are we going to allow sinfulness to reign in our lives so much that we're fighting harder for sin than we're fighting for God? I have to ask that question to myself. And I have to take into consideration my priorities and my lifestyle and the way that I'm living. Am I fighting harder to keep the sinful things in my life and to justify myself, or am I fighting harder for God? Because if I find myself that I'm fighting for sin in this world and to live like the rest of the world, I'm on the wrong side. This story speaks volumes to the sinful nature that man finds himself in when we do not follow after God. Micah eventually, he gives up. He realizes that the Danites are too strong for him, and he goes his way and they go theirs. So it says there in verse 27, so they took the things that Micah had made and the priests who had belonged to him and went to Laish to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they built the city and dwelt there, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born into Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. And the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of captivity of the Lamb. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. So here we see that they were going to go. They went to Laish. They took the city. They burned it. I've never understood that. I've never understood conquering a city and planning on living there and burning everything to the ground first. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Take it apart, disassemble it, maybe, but burning it all, I don't. That's just a personal thing. They defeated the city with a sword. So they went on a killing spree. They burned it all down. They built their own city. They renamed the city Dan. And Jonathan, who was the grandson of Gershom, the son of Moses, served with his descendants as priests of the people until they were taken captive. This is what idolatry does. It influences people. It influences families. It influences outsiders that come into your home. It influences entire nations, entire tribes. If we let things come between us and God, our lives might not be exactly like Micah and exactly like the Danites, but the same punishment's coming. They got punishment and separation from God and from his people. And ours might not happen in this lifetime, but will definitely happen in the next. If we do not follow after God, and if we allow things to come in front of and get in front of our relationship between us and God, we will too be separated from God, separated from his people, and not gain that entrance that is promised to us into heaven. And so next week, we'll pick up in Judges chapter 19. We will attempt to cover 19 through the end of the chapter. That will be our attempt. We will see how that goes. But just so if you want to read ahead, read Judges 19 through 21, and we'll pick up there next week.